Hello guys, Chinsun here. Today I'll be reading some r/BlackholeRevenge. I'm sure you guys are kinda craving for some justice. Extreme justice. Anyways, enjoy. Insane revenge against his grandma. 10 years ago, I murdered my grandmother and have been celebrating it with my family. Deleted r/confession post. And this is not mine. It was originally posted by u/throwawayhappiness10. I saw it several days ago and I just remembered it. I had to find an archive copy since the post was deleted. I'm not sure if it's a troll or not, but earned on the side of karma whoring. This is one hell of a story. Never been good at writing essays, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. I am now the only child from my parents, but this wasn't always the case. My dad is a spineless cuck that is dominated by my ruthless mother. When I was around 2 years old and living in Sweden, my dad went on a trip to Syria to visit my grandmother that used to live there, the one I murdered, and stayed with her for 1 year because she had a tumor and had to get a few operations. During this year, he was a regular to prostitute he fancied. Eventually, he got her pregnant. After giving birth, she came to my grandmother's house and just dumped her daughter on him and left. She ghosted him, and he could not find her anymore. My grandmother called my mother, and all hell broke loose. My mother ordered him to throw my sister in the dumpster and pretend she was not alive because she was filth. My dad was very close to doing this, but somehow what's left of his fatherhood woke up for a second. And he didn't throw my sister away. He instead convinced my grandmother to keep her, and eventually she would take care of herself when she grew up. Technically, just having her as a servant. That was the most humane solution he could come up with. When I eventually grew up, I met my sister when I was visiting my grandmother, and we got really close. She even looked a lot like me, so I had no doubt she was my sister. But the way she was living was just awful. It broke my heart seeing how underfed she was. Her clothes were one rip away from being rags, and she was not allowed to use my grandmother's combs and stuff to fix her hair. I would collect any money I got and send it to her, but my grandmother eventually found out and started taking them for herself. She was never allowed to go to school and could only see a doctor when she became seriously ill. By the time she reached 14 years old, she admitted to me that she was thinking about killing herself because she could not see any future for herself. My dad would just marry her to some shit family as soon as grandmother died, and she would be more like a commodity to be traded. On 13th of June, 2008, my sister had a fight with my grandmother and was holding a can of gasoline and saying that she was going to burn herself. My grandmother laughed and dared her to do it, which my sister did. My sister lived and died miserably. At first, my parents told me that it was an accident, but I overheard them talking about what happened in detail. By this point, my dad did not even care. I was very disgusted with him and my mother. I dream a lot about jumping on them and biting their fucking throats off, and just watch them bleed in horror as I kick their face in. I wanted to hold his jaw from the inside with my hands, and just rip it from his face. I eventually brewed it and started going over the events. 3 guilty people, and I was planning on killing them all, as violently as possible. I could never come up with a plan regarding my parents, but I was already done with how to end my grandmother. The filth who made life miserable for my sister. On December 2008, I booked a ticket to visit my grandmother and was supposed to return before New York to celebrate with my friends. I told my parents that my friend is picking me up from the airport and I'm going to be staying with him for a few days before coming back. I then called my friend and told him that I'm going to bang a girl that I met, and if my parents ever ask him about me, he would have to cover for me. Him being oblivious to what I was actually doing, agreed. I flew to Syria, stayed with my grandmother for about 2 weeks, and when the day of my flight came, I packed my bags and told her that I'm going to the airport. With disgust, I kissed her goodbye, and then made as much noise as possible with my bags to make sure that the noisy neighbors saw me leave for the airport. I even called a taxi driver that lived nearby, and he took me directly to the airport. I made sure he saw me get into the airport. I then stood at the check-in and took a selfie. I didn't check in. I turned around and walked out. I took a cab to a nearby hotel and dropped my bags off in a room. I changed my clothes and then took a cab back to my grandmother's apartment. It was 2 at night, and it was very quiet when I got up the stairs. I knocked on her door, and she opened when she saw me through the hole. She was surprised to see me and was wondering about the flight. I told her it was delayed for a few hours, so I left the bags at the check-in with the employees. She was tired, so she decided to us some tea while I waited. As soon as I got up, I stood in front of her. She had this very confused look on her face due to my sudden reaction. I had not planned how to exactly do it, but I knew this is as good as it gets. Really quickly, I held her neck with my hands. My thumbs pressed on her throat very hard in case she tried to scream. She instantly got a horrified look on her face, and I just got really angry. She tried to speak but couldn't make a single sound. At first, she tried hitting me, but my arms were longer than hers and she could not reach me. When I started applying pressure, she tried to scratch my arms instead. But I was wearing a thick sweater and also I was being pumped with adrenaline. When I saw her strangling, I became very angry. I was grinding my teeth so hard I almost broke them. I told her this is for my sister. I kept repeating my sister's name in a quiet, angry tone, but she couldn't hear me. She was panicking, and her only concern was getting air. She then kind of just froze there. I kept squeezing, even though she didn't move. I really wanted to make sure. I finally let go after a while. My hands were cramped from all that tension, and I listened for a heartbeat. I sat there on the sofa, took a few breaths, and choked her again real hard for around 10 minutes. When I was sure she was dead, I started opening every drawer she had until I finally found her gold and money. I put them in a small bag and left. I closed the door behind me in case a neighbor found her too early. I walked for nearly a whole hour while my hands were shaking as crazy. Until I was finally far away, I threw the bag with the money and gold in a small trash bucket that people had in front of their house. I went and took a taxi to a hotel, and I remembered my sister and cried. I remembered my grandmother's face and I calmed down. I felt complete. Like when a daunting task was finally over. A very soothing relief. That night, I slept like a fucking baby. I woke up the next morning and brought breakfast and booked a ticket back to Sweden the same day. I turned the TV on and put in some music. For the first time after my sister's death, I was happy. When I came back to Sweden, I took the bus back from the airport and later took the train to my friend's house. Told him that the girl dumped me and I was instead celebrating with him. My dad calls me 2 days later and informs me that grandmother was robbed and that the thief stole her valuables and killed her when she saw him. No one suspected a fucking thing. I acted surprised and made my way back. For a few months, I acted sad and secretly watched my family in case someone got a wild theory. But they all seemed to believe the robbery part since it's not that uncommon. The closest someone got was my uncle, when he mentioned how unfortunate it was that I left a day before this, and that I could have saved her. My mother called it lucky because I maybe would have also gotten killed. I pretended to be sad about it. Now every year, my dad makes a ceremony to kind of remember my grandmother. They make dinner for family and friends and hope that the prayers reach her. They don't fucking know that this is a time for a celebration for me. I am now married and I have 3 kids. The plan of killing my parents is cancelled due to them fucking themselves over so bad that it's more of a punishment if they stayed alive. They are also not allowed near my children. As a punishment to how they treated my sister, every year I celebrated this by buying gifts for my wife and kids. My wife wondered why I did this, and I simply said that the way my grandmother passed made me realize how suddenly loved ones can disappear, and how this is my way of saying I love you. This became long enough, and I apologize for many grandma errors you will find. You bullied me for 8 years? Enjoy missing half your body. So, to start off, I was 14, straight A student and vengeful as vengeful can get. When I was 6, a new kid came to my school, well, we'll call him douchebag, and started picking on me. But I didn't really pay too much attention. Fast forward a couple years, and I'm 11. The picking transformed into straight up bullying, calling me names, beating me up for being a nerd, being atheist, his family is Christian, stealing from me. He even hit me in the leg with a metal baseball bat, destroying my fibula and tibia. They're fine now. It got to the point where the popular kids gang up on me and beat me up every day. This continued until the very day we were leaving on a trip to the zoo. I was widely interested in animals, so I was excited. Douchebag must have had seen this, because he made my day a living hell. The time came, we got to the bears, and Douchebag came to me and whispered to me, "I love you being eaten alive by those things." Before we continue, I'll say that this was a 15-foot or so gap that separated the bridge we were standing on, and the floor where the bears were. Back to the story. I backed off and waited for him to get distracted. I saw the opportunity, grabbed him by the legs, and dropped him beside a bear. The bear must have been scared because he started mauling Douchebag. 2 other bears joined. We were evacuated immediately. I just recently heard that Douchebag survived, but is missing both his eyes, his nose, his left arm, and both his legs. Nothing more satisfying than seeing the one who tormented you for almost a decade fall victim to your plans. No one messed with me after that day. Douchebag, if you're reading this, I'm not sorry. Oh, that's right, you have no eyes. Edit. April 23rd, 2019. I just got a text from my friend that Douchebag actually committed suicide yesterday. Don't mess with me, or you'll learn the lesson the hard way. In a friendly way. Now this story in particular, I'm a bit sketched about it. but I've seen pictures of aftermath of bear attacks, and it's gruesome. I can't show one of them, but I'll describe it. It's a hunter where his whole face besides one eye was intact. Bear part, it's pretty reasonable. Now, if it was a black bear, that is mega reasonable. Only sketch part is that OP didn't get charged or punished at least, because I'm sure someone at least saw them. Anyway guys, that would be all from me for today. I do love me some revenge, but be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. I'll be back tomorrow with more reads. Have a nice day guys. See ya!